Hello and welcome. I'm your host Tyler here with
Nick.
and you're listening to Makeshift Meeples, where we won't teach you how to play board games, we just talk about them. Nick, what are we playing today?
This week on Makeshift Meeples, Oath of the Brotherhood, The Chosen.
Oath of the Brotherhood is designed by Evangelos Bargetekis and Tony Cimino, published by AEG with art from Tygo de Salva and Othon Nikolaidis.
Oath of the Brotherhood is a strategic worker placement game for 2 to 5 players. You'll take on the role of a ship's captain seeking to prove your worth to a famous pirate lord by gathering the necessary resources in order to fulfill missions and gain the necessary victory points to win.
All right, Nick, this week we're here to raid some booty.
Yeah.
Playing
You were really excited about this week,
Yeah.
getting to play some pirates.
I've actually played Oath of the Brotherhood once before, and
Okay.
I think it was more fun this time.
Really?
Yeah, and now, before I played it, I think...
Well, that's because I'm fun to play games with.
Yeah, it was all you. I do think it was all you. You made the difference. No, the people I played with before were great. But we did play a 4-player game, and it was interesting getting to see the difference between just playing with you and I, like we did this time, and the 4-player game that I had played previously.
Yeah.
I also think that playing this game beforehand, so twice, made it much easier to understand the rules. Because as we found out just going through this game, we had to look up the rules a lot. There was a lot of, I would say, icons that were used to describe or game mechanics.
Yeah, and that's something we talked about kind of right after we played, but before we started recording here, was this game could really use a solid player aid for like the symbols and what they mean. Some of them make sense, but there's a lot of times that we were like, hey, does this do this thing? Yeah, okay, yeah it does.
Well, there was many times during the game when both you and I made a decision based upon what we thought we could do, but because the meeples are different, and there's only like two different meeples. There's pawns and then your captain, and your captain can do certain things if you have resources on the board. Yeah, so it's kind of difficult to understand the exact board state and what you can do. It's really easy to understand, but at the same time, there's just so many things you're thinking about that it's easy to forget as well.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that it's deceptive how much there is going on in this game.
Yeah.
Because at its core, it's a very simple worker placement game. And you and I talked a little bit about how we would compare this to like Lords of Waterdeep. Mm-hmm. And the more I've kind of thought about it, I think that a better comparison would be Stone Age.
I haven't played Stone Age.
So Stone Age is another worker placement game. It's a little... I just think it's a closer comparison. Mm-hmm. And all 3 of these games cost literally the exact same amount.
They're all $50.
They're all $50 games.
Huh.
So I think Stone Age is a little more accessible for newer players, and I think this game's a little more accessible as well. Lords of Waterdeep is really heavy themed in, D&D lore and history. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that are in that game that, not even like mechanic wise, but it's a very heavy D&D game.
Yeah.
Whereas this is pirates, and Stone Age is, cavemen, So they all have very different themes, but they're all fairly similar in a couple of different ways.
Yeah, and it's interesting how you describe the 2 games, Oath of the Brotherhood and Stone Age. One is cavemen, very simple, and the other one is pirates, but then you talk about Lords of Waterdeep, and D&D encompasses so much more than just pirates or cavemen.
Yeah.
So there could be way more lore there if you're into that.
Yep.
One thing that I really loved about playing Oath of the Brotherhood was how the board changed over time. Like, the board is basic, right? There's an action for everything on the board. There's nothing that's missing. But you can reveal exploration cards, which add to the board and give you more action locations or opportunities.
And that's something that you get in Lords of Waterdeep, but you don't really get in Stone Age.
Okay.
I don't think so, at least. It's been a while since I played Stone Age, but... Yeah, I don't think you get as much of that in Stone Age, if any at all, actually.
And if I recall in Lords of Waterdeep, the additional places that become available for you to put cards are created by the players, right? You have to build them, and then you own that, and you can gain things. Okay, so there's a little bit of a difference there.
Because these are community. In this game, they're community spaces that are just available.
Yeah.
For anybody to use.
And they're almost like different versions of the spaces that already exist. Like one I think we revealed was the Witch, and it was you can pay a gold to gain 3 endurance.
Right.
And that was very close to the inn, except the inn you
didn't have to pay gold,
and there was
and
two
you just
spots.
got two.
Yeah.
Well, and they were all kind of like variations of existing spots.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like you had to open some of those up to do certain quests or anything. But like one of the other ones we had, you could get either an equipment or a barrel. I don't remember what they're called.
I think they played very well too, because normally you had to pay something, or it gave you less of something, but a choice between two things.
Yeah.
And that just felt good because, for instance, you, I think, had a character that let you get more gold when you go to a certain location, and that was the only location you could actually get gold from. So if I wanted to put just a normal guy there, I would have had to pay a energy, or I think they're called endurance points, to go there. But we revealed a spot that gave me gold for paying endurance anyway. So it's like instead of taking the hit, I could take the hit but get more stuff for it.
Right. There was definitely a better cost benefit for you in that.
For sure.
But that was something else we kind of talked about, was we played, because we're recording this 4th of July weekend, and 4th of July was the Thursday when we normally play, so we're kind of in a different schedule, but we played just the two of us this week, which is something we haven't done before.
No.
And also playing a game that's designed for 2 to 5 players, which is a little interesting. Playing it at the minimum number. Sometimes there's a lot of games that get put out that are like, yes, you can play this with 2 players, or you can play it with 4 players, but we all know like that's really a 3 or 4 player game.
Yeah.
Like as a 2-player game, it's just not good. I thought this played pretty good as a 2-player game. I really did.
I think that after playing it as a 2-player game and finishing, the amount of point differential between just both of us playing was very low. It was like within 3 points.
Yeah,
and I thought it was going to be much further away. I thought maybe you'd be like 6 points ahead, which would have been a whole big mission, or 2 small missions.
Yeah.
But you seemed like you were ahead, but in the end, I think that if I would have just made a couple more choices, maybe it would have been even closer than that.
Yeah.
So
we talked about there was 1 or 2 decisions you made that, because there's bonus points awarded at the end of the game for having like the most missions completed, the most endurance,
the most crew members,
the most
tokens
gold
on your board, and the most gold.
And I think there was what, 5 of those?
Yeah.
And I think we actually tied on 3 of them.
Yeah, I think I got 1 more point than you. So I think I got 2 coins, and then you got 1 coin, and then we tied on the other 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of, because the only one I got was coins. I had more money than you.
Yeah.
Because I had a guy that made me money.
Yeah, he was great at that. He was, wasn't there a guy named Dollar Bill?
There was. Some of the names in this game are pretty hilarious, too. So,
you're the first guy you got was like the tree. He just stands in people's way, and
I feel like he's the guy that just like he gets in your way and says, "Give me your money." Yeah. Like that's all he did. He just got in your way and said, "Give me your money."
Yeah, Nick. I don't think we ever came to pirate names, but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe by the end of this recording, we'll have some good pirate names for each other.
That's we'll post it on Facebook or something. We'll get pirate names out there.
Yeah. Well, what did you think of the art? Because you were talking about how heavy the theme was in this game. I thought the art was beautiful, and I thought that it actually made the game feel good. And personally, I thought the cards looked better than the board.
Better than the board?
Well, the board, I think it was made in a way to look like a good board because it changes over time.
Sure.
So
you kind of have to have free space.
Yeah, and there was a lot on the board too since the track was on there, and you had to put cards on the board too for like the black market and the tavern and your Brotherhood where you got missions. So I think that the board's actually made the way it needed to be. But I just mean in terms of the aesthetic and like the detail on the cards looked much better than the detail on the board. But that's not a bad thing because you're putting the cards on the board too.
Yeah, because like every time you do the little explorer action, you get a new space. Like there's a whole new card with beautiful art that's going onto the board as well.
Yeah, and I think that as just like a random game that most people have never heard of.
Yeah.
This game it plays better and it looks better than most people would probably assume.
I'll be honest with you, like I completely missed this game when it came out 3 years ago.
Yeah, something like that.
But this game is still readily available. So that kind of surprised me because, typically you have a game that comes out. If it doesn't do really well in the first year or two, it kind of just disappears into the ether. But this one is stuck around. And I mean, maybe it's just our particular area didn't sell really well, but other areas it has. I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't come into this with really high expectations, but it was a pretty solid game. And again, because it played well at 2 players as a worker placement, that's not something you see all the time either. Because a lot of times worker placement games get interesting when you have difficult decisions to make. And I think that there would be more difficult decisions with more players, but I still, trying to figure out the missions and where you were going and what my abilities were, there was enough of a challenge there that it was still interesting.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the missions, one thing that I loved about Oath of the Brotherhood, as opposed to other worker placements that I play, is the board cycles every turn.
Yeah.
So your missions that don't get taken will go away. The black market will shift because the lowest cost black market card gets discarded and everything goes down 1 cost.
Yeah, so even if you don't buy it, if nobody buys anything on the black market, it's still going to change.
Yeah, and the same thing happens with the tavern, which is where you purchase crew members. So if nobody buys that crew member, it's still going to cycle to another one. You don't have to go there and purchase it just to try to get another one.
And that's a pretty significant difference, because I think both of the other worker placement games we've talked about don't have that cycling effect. So you almost have to wait till somebody buys a thing to get a new thing out a lot of times. Or you have to take an action to reveal a new thing. You know, like you have to force the market to rotate, versus in this one, it's going to happen.
Yeah, and I haven't played the other 2 games very much, but in this game, the first player symbol or first player token doesn't rotate, and I thought it did, so we only found out when you mentioned it that it doesn't. So
we found out when you tried to steal the first player token, and I said no.
Yeah, that's true. And you can only get in that first player token by taking action on the board.
Correct.
And then you reveal the exploration card as well. But I don't know, I kind of like that, because if you don't value the first player token, then the person who has it will keep it.
Yeah.
Which is very powerful, as we discussed, because the board only cycles at the beginning of each round. The first player has a very powerful option to either gain a huge action economy boost by taking something in the marketplace or by buying a crew member. And the only thing that I really felt was weak about the gain the first player token action was that you reveal a location and you don't get to use it. So everybody else gets the option to use it, and there can only be one person that plays
unless you had there was equipment that let you essentially look at the top 2 or 3 and kind of like store it away until your turn, then you could use it.
Yeah, and I thought that was really powerful too. I think it was a sextant or a spyglass, one of the 2.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do agree. And now, one thing that we didn't really get to do was use a lot of those card powers. I think they're
the
called
action cards.
Yeah, well, not the.
I used a ton of action cards because they were pretty solid, actually.
I actually wasn't talking about those, but we can talk about the action cards now because I do think they were powerful.
Yeah.
One that I had was like you can gain 3 gold and everybody else gains 1 gold, which is much better in a 2-player game for me than it would be in a 5-player game. Because then it'd be inefficient, technically.
There'd be more gold going to the board than to you.
Yeah, if you've ever played a game where giving your opponents is something, the more players you have.
We talked about this when we played Wingspan, man. I'm not an across the board. That's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because if it's allowing you to earn victory points, and your opponents get a little bit of a bump.
Yeah.
I still say that more often than not, that's worth it.
Yeah. Well, I do think that because you could play the card on your turn at the beginning or the end, whenever you want it on your turn, pretty much, it made it much more easy to use because I could just hold on that card. I didn't have to worry about anybody discarding it from my hand. So I could use it when it was most beneficial as to when I had it. Like if I were to just draw an action card and be forced to play it, it would have felt way worse.
Yeah, because you might get no use out of it, and it basically saves one of your opponents in action at that point.
So I definitely think that felt good. What did you think about the overall action economy in the game? Because that's what this game is about, right?
Yeah, so we've played a couple of different games, or we've talked about a couple of different games. We've played a couple of different games that have kind of a worker placement aspect to them. Most recently, Wingspan, which we both really liked. It definitely has that worker placement kind of feel to it when you get into the game. But unlike other worker placement games, you never get more workers in this game.
That's true. That's actually something that's interesting. Very interesting you mentioned now that I think about it, because we played Dogs of War, and in that game, over time, you
would
lose
get more
workers.
Yeah.
Or you could gain workers by doing an action on the board. But you still lose them over time. In this one, you don't. It's a constant amount.
You have the exact same. But even in that game, even though you were losing workers, using air quotes, you know, you were getting better efficiencies out of them.
That's true, yeah.
And same thing in Wingspan, you were losing workers, but you were gaining efficiencies.
True.
This game, you never gain workers, you never lose workers. And like in Stone Age, you gain workers, but you have to feed them. In a lot of worker placement games, you gain workers, so you can do more stuff. Viticulture is another example of that, like where you can get more workers to do more stuff, but there's an offsetting penalty to it as well. With this one, there's not even a choice to get more workers. Like you just have what you have.
You have to try to get action efficiency out of the crewmates that you have, and the missions that you want to accept. You don't just want to accept a mission because it's there and it's worth a lot of points. You want to accept it because it works with
and also
the stuff you built.
Some of the missions had rewards, and some didn't. And I guess, what did you think about the ones that did have rewards versus the ones that didn't?
I thought that it made the placement of the resources on your cards much more important, because you can't move your resources once you place them. And if you all of a sudden complete a mission that gives you a resource that you already have, then that resource becomes less efficient. So it just makes even more importance on where you put the stuff on your card and how you want to plan out your turn. And I think that that's where the interaction comes from with the players and where they're putting their pieces on the board. It's interfering with your action efficiency, your action economy.
Yeah, I think it's just really tricky to talk about action efficiency in a game where you're not getting more actions.
Yeah.
Your actions aren't actually becoming more efficient. So you're almost throughout the game working with the same resources you have available. The exception to that being as more places to go are revealed, you may not have to spend, you know, your strength or whatever to get those other resources. And I don't know if that's really making your actions more efficient or not, but it's the one offsetting thing. So it was interesting in that, like, trying to get a mission completed in turn 7 wasn't really that much easier than trying to get it resolved in turn 2.
Yeah, I think I felt the same way, because during the last two turns, I thought round 6 was going to be the end of the game. So I planned my my turn in based upon the fact that we were going to get one last chance to complete a quest or a mission. But even though I was wrong, we had a whole extra turn, I was still able to get and complete another mission within that round, having misplanned by a whole round.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I would agree with you that it felt very consistent.
I mean, my immediate reaction is, does that mean that this game is a little more forgiving?
Maybe. Well, one thing I did notice is you can use the resource card, in very useful ways that we didn't even get into.
Yeah.
So I think if you have extra resources that you forgot to use, or maybe you finish a quest and it gives you a resource you didn't think it was going to give you or you forgot about, you can make use of it. It's very useful. It doesn't cost you an action to use it. It just costs you a token, which technically you use action to get, but sometimes you get free tokens, which could kind of be improving your action economy, right?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, so you played a 4-player game too. Did you think that in the 4-player game, it was more difficult to make the decisions of where to place your meeples? I
think in a 4-player game, when you play with everybody the first time, this game is very confusing because there's so many things you can do.
Yeah.
And so many different icons that it feels much slower to play because everybody's confused.
Okay. Like the turns just take a little longer because you're like, well, if I do this, is that how that works?
Yeah. Like even just playing with you and I, there were times when you had to, say instead of playing a normal crew member in a location, you played your pirate there. Yeah. But that happened every turn with 4 players.
You were forced to use your pirate in a very specific location.
Or you had to take back what you were going to do because it was going to mean that you either couldn't do it because you were out of energy, or okay. Yeah, people had to rethink their turns more in a 4-player game than we had to.
Okay.
But that, I think, is just an exponential difficulty increase with, more people sitting down,
more restrictions on where you can go.
Yeah. And I wasn't as good at the rules because I didn't know, so it was more difficult for me to explain.
Sure.
So I do think that is maybe a little bit of a detraction, but this game I think definitely gets better once you play it multiple times.
Yeah, I could say, like, if we sat down and played again, like, this game would go very quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that's a bonus for it, to be honest with you, because it's not meant to be a really heavy game, it didn't seem like.
I think they said it's like 60 minutes. 60 minutes with 4 players, which is super quick.
I mean, honestly, the one thing I wish this game had, and this is my complaint, and it's a pretty small one, is that it had a really solid player aid card that explained what all of those abilities on your ship, did.
Yeah. Well, one thing that
just worded it out.
I agree, because they only have those printed in the back of the book.
Yeah.
And if you have 5 players that all want to look at the book, that's going to slow the game down too. They could have even just printed it on like a sheet of paper that wasn't attached to the rule book, so that you could have that sheet of paper out in front of everybody at all times.
Then you have the rule book and one sheet at least that can be passed around. Yeah. I mean, that's honestly, if you buy this game, that's something you can easily type up yourself.
That's a good idea.
And be done.
I hadn't even considered doing extra work to make it easy for everybody.
It takes you like 30 seconds, man.
There might be something already created out there too.
There may be, I mean, I think that would exponentially improve the overall feel of this game and just replayability in general. But even having played it once, I agree. I think if we played it again with 2 players, I think we could probably finish up in closer to like 50 minutes or 45 minutes even.
Yeah, easily. I did want to comment on the box layout.
Oh, yeah.
Because on the inside, I'm not going to say it's the most beautiful box ever, but the way it's designed is everything fits in these, I would call them like semicircles, and you can use the box as a holder, like a bank for all the tokens, instead of having to put all the tokens on the table. It's just something I've noticed with all the games we play. Even if they have cartons that you can take out or bags that you can take out, it's still really clutterful. Is that a word? Clutterful? Yeah.
It's not colorful. Well, it is colorful.
It is.
But it's also less clutter. And this is something like I think we'll talk about as long as board games are made. When board games are sold, do they have an insert that is useful in, after you open the game and punch all the parts and are actually playing it? And I think a lot of companies have heard this complaint from players and no longer ship you a box with stuff in it. They're now shipping you a box with an insert that's at least helpful in storing the game or playing the game. And, I mean, there have been some really good examples, like Dice Forge, I think, did a fantastic job with it. This game does a really, really good job with it because it's basically it's one of the best, like, playable storage solutions that I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, and it's not fancy either.
No, it doesn't have to be. I mean, it just works really well.
Yeah, they're just cups inside of plastic.
Yep.
And so far, I haven't had it spill out in my car. So I know that compared to other games, it just stores better when I'm traveling with it.
I mean, box bans always help you out.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
That's always something you should look into if you're traveling with your games a lot.
For sure.
So outside of that, like the one other thing I was going to say is, and honestly, us talking a little bit made this a tougher decision because I was looking at this game and saying to myself, if I had to choose between buying Lords of Waterdeep, or buying Stone Age, and I can only get one, which one do I get? That's a really tough decision, to be honest with you. For a multitude of reasons. And the box insert, I have to say, kind of gives this a little bit of a leg up in that respect.
You think it's better than some of the other games you mentioned?
I mean, Lords of Waterdeep, you can buy inserts for it, but then you're talking about spending another $20 or $30 on it. And Stone Age, I believe it comes with bags and solutions like that. But this is by far the best of the 3 in that respect. I personally might still go for Lords of Waterdeep just because I prefer that D&D theme. But if D&D's not your thing, this is a really solid game. And if you're newer to gaming, I think it's a fantastic way to get into and learn about worker placement as well. And the other thing is it's a little bit different than both of the others. Stone Age I really like too. There's little bits and pieces of that game I really enjoy. So it's a tough choice. I don't know. We'll see when we get to rating stuff.
Well, Nick, how many Captain Jack Sparrows would you give this one out of 10?
No, man, I'm rating this on peg legs.
I would if we're doing equipment, I would rather rate it on hook hands.
You can rate it on hook hands. I'm going with peg legs.
Okay, what do you give?
I think I'm going to give it a solid 7. I really enjoy this game. I think it's got a great insert. I could see replaying this a lot, and honestly, it's a worker placement game that you can play with some slightly younger players that maybe aren't ready for a real heavy game too.
I think 7's a fair number for this game, and not to mention, like you said, it doesn't have to be played with people who love pirates.
Yeah.
But that is a reason to get this game over the other ones.
Yeah. If you're a piratey person and you celebrate Talk Like a Pirate Day every year, that's the determining factor. You get this game over the other two. For
sure. So officially we've decided that pirates are better than ninjas, right? This ends the argument.
I don't know about that.
I don't know. We'll have to play a ninja game sometime to figure that one
Balance
out.
it out. Yeah.
Well, thanks for playing with me today, Nick. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to Makeshift Meeples.
You can see more about our upcoming shows on our website, makeshiftmeeples.com, as well as offer us feedback or contact us about games you would like to see on the show.
If you enjoyed the episode, there are a number of ways you can help us keep this thing going.
Share this episode with a friend.
Hit that subscribe button so that you're notified of future episodes.
Like and follow us on social media.
And you can support us on the Patreon and Anchor app.